We want to tell you the rest of the story during this program. The city of St. Louis is leaving hundreds of people out on the streets after it shut down the 1411 Locust building. Elliott Davis is out there among the people, went out the other night and showed the people that are hurting, people that are left out on the streets. City officials saw that, and after seeing it come through live, they immediately had Bill House open back up. But unless Elliott is out there, they continue to keep it closed. We need all of you at this particular time. After shutting down the New Life Evangelistic Center, hundreds of people remain on the streets in downtown St. Louis. You can make a big difference. Let's go to Elliott.
I am keeping you guys updated on the plight of the homeless here, and what you can see are a lot of people here. This is outside of the Biddle House homeless shelter, and we're no longer in the cold weather rules, so at 6 o'clock, many are told that they have to leave, and so you have a lot of the homeless here out on the street. They've been here throughout the day, but at 6 o'clock, they're having to leave, and so they have to basically find their way from here. They have to basically find a way to survive the night and then try to come back tomorrow morning a lot. And you can see a lot of people over here, essentially, and they have to figure out just how they're going to survive the night, try to find a place to be. Here's Biddle House. Obviously, you can see here inside, and their rule basically is when it gets 20 degrees or below, then they will let everybody in. And I showed you that when that was taking place. When that's not in effect, then the folk are having to leave at 6 o'clock, where they're putting them out. They have to make their own way. Many don't want to get too far away from here because you have to come back at 6 a.m. in the morning. They open the doors for the day, and if you're going to have any chance at all at trying to find a place, then you have to be first in line. So there are people who've been out here a solid week, basically. There have been people who've been out here a solid week. People who've been out here a solid week. And have not been able to get in. And so big questions are whether the city is doing enough to help the homeless, because what you find is that people are still relegated to being out on the streets, being across the street from a homeless shelter. And this is always the most amazing thing, that you've got a homeless shelter here that's obviously supposed to help folks, and the people are across the street from the homeless shelter and they cannot get inside. And so what you find is that people trying to figure out what they are going to do here. And we talked to this young lady who tried to get in, and she says she can't get in here because this shelter is just for men. And so, but there are a lot of women out here who are homeless too, and many times they get lost in the shuffle. I mean, they get out of luck. This is Clyde?
Yes.
Clyde, what you tried to get in?
Yes.
You tried to get.
There was a woman in a wheelchair that was asking the same question. She was confused as heck when I said you cannot come in unless you're a man. She said, "Where do women go?" I said, "I don't know. It's not overflow. It's not below 20 degrees. So we out here."
So what happened to you? You went to...
I went inside and asked, and they said if I was battered or had children, they had a place. Otherwise, call Housing Hotline, which they full at Housing Hotline. There's no beds open. St. Patrick's is full.
So every place you called was full?
Yes, and I wondered if there was some states do things like hotel rooms whenever it's really cold. The city will voucher a hotel room. And Pastor Reverend Ray said he couldn't do that either. He didn't know nothing about that.
So what do you do?
I sleep out here by the dumpster. Sometimes I like the other night when it rained first, I lit a fire right here and put my feet over it because my feet have frostbite. I'm so cold and wet. And it's scary to take your socks off, but when they're wet, it turns out you get warmer.
So you were sleeping out here by the dumpster, and I'm going to continue to show you guys this Biddle House right across the street, the city's homeless shelter. You can see some men right down the street here because at 6 o'clock, a lot of them got put out. And here is Clyde, basically, Biddle House doesn't take women. And you're saying, did you ask them to call? Did they offer to call
No,
transportation to take you to a women's shelter?
They do not offer a public phone or a public restroom. It's not their problem. I need to make choices in my life and figure something out and do for me is what I was told. I said, what else can I do? I can't get a job. I don't have an address. I can't get the ID because I don't have the dollars. I'm not allowed to hold a sign because the mayor don't want me to. So what do you want me to do?
So many times you said often you trying to panhandle or raise enough to stay in a hotel.
Yeah, because it's $35 for a hotel room. That'd be so nice. I get, all the way to 11 to sleep inside by myself. I don't have to worry about no fears. Here I sleep because the cops come by here all the time. You're not allowed to sleep out St. Pat's, the parks, nothing. So here's where I am. It's safe and the police come by, but it stinks and it sucks. Whatever.
So you're stuck sleeping behind the dumpster?
Yep, until I can get more availability of resources. I've been around the city looking for resources on how can I get a job through like a program to help me, because I don't have an alarm clock, I don't have clothes, I don't have a lot of things that job people have, especially an address.
So it's like, let me get your name.
Clyde Washington.
So basically for you then it's a day-to-day survival.
Oh, yes. Minute to minute, hour to hour. Yeah.
And you come to, logically, the city's homeless shelter, believing that you can get some help here. Only what? What do they tell you?
They tell you that they cannot help. They have no resources available. Their beds are full. It's for men. They don't know what else to tell me. They have nothing to say to me. I just get frustrated, so I stop asking. Just stop asking.
So here you come, basically across the street. Is this a safe place to be?
It's safer when the police sit here. Usually, they're right there. Usually the police, but there's a lot of people right now. But in a little bit, the police. Yeah, see, as soon as we sit, we're not allowed on that side. We have to be on this side. So you can't be by Fish Market. You can't be by the Biddle. You have to be out here by the dumpsters. That's the place you're allowed to be.
And who are you guys? Okay.
We have a ministry, SOS.
Okay.
Down here every Wednesday.
What? Tell me.
He's my favorite.
So what do you guys do?
We come down every Wednesday night and bring down coats and blankets and food and stuff, try to help out.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few that are out here tonight. Where's Aaron? Aaron's down there, young kid that's 23 years old that's never been out on the streets before. He's scared to death. We're going to try to buddy him up with you tonight if we can so that he can stay safe. And you've been out here a couple weeks, right? So, there's just no room, as they say, no room at the end. There's no room over here for people. I hear that they line up at 3, 4 in the morning, get to be the number one in line, and still don't get a bed. So
right. And we're back when the cold weather rule is not in effect. They're really out of luck.
Really out here. That's why you see more out here tonight because it's above 20 degrees.
Right.
And we're looking at just all the people out here. Just kind of let me do this one thing. And you look. Go ahead.
Not only that, you got St. Louis Metro Police coming out here assisting them.
Okay.
Taking people to different.
So we've got a lot of people. If you look down here, look at all the folks here. And then what about women? And we were talking to Clyde, and she was saying basically that
we have two women's shelters down here, or 3 actually. St. Patrick's. We have.
And she said they were full.
They are Gateway 180, and then there's Karen's house. Have you been to Karen's house?
Karen's house is for the battered.
For the battered, and you're not battered.
Not current.
So what do women do?
Oh, Lord, I don't know. They're supposed to take them in first, women and children first.
But
that's why Larry Rice.
They certainly don't take them. Middle house is for men.
One thing about Larry Rice was that they were good about taking women and children in first, and then the men had to fend for themselves. But we don't have Larry Rice anymore.
Yeah. So how are we missing New Life and Larry Rice?
Well, 300 beds, 300 people that we're fitting into, guaranteed.
Plus every day, the people that came and stood in line, waited for food, plus the people that worked there that stayed there too. There's so many more people that aren't accounted for in that building. Larry Rice does a lot of things for the community. I don't care what anybody says, he helped us.
Did you stay it? Is it worse since New Life was shut down?
No, when I was battered, I came straight to Larry Rice. That's what the police in Illinois told me to do. They gave me a $3 Metrolink ticket and said, go to Larry Rice. I came here, went to Horizon Center. They said Larry Rice is over there. I went to Larry Rice. I've been there ever since it closed down.
But when it shut down, that made it harder for the homeless, didn't it?
A lot. And supposedly we have around 2,000, 2,500 homeless people in the downtown St. Louis area. And we have shelters that may shelter maybe 500, 600. Mm-hmm. And unless emergency shelters open up, and it has to get below 20 degrees at night.
We saw a couple of churches.
We can't freeze at 30. We can't freeze at 30.
Not 32 like water. And during the day, if it's 20 below, they don't care either. You gotta wait till
So, but basically, this is where you were going to be.
Yeah, I just sweep up around because I don't like dirt, but
But at least, so you're surrounded.
It's recyclable, and then that starts the trash. But the wind's blowing that way, so I stay on this side.
And basically, because you feel more secure here.
Oh, yeah, because the police will sit here because, there's problems with men all the time.
Okay.
So,
the police go kind of up and down there so you feel as safe as you can be.
Well,
but
it's the only place they won't move me. Everywhere else, they move me. Okay. I'm not allowed to sleep in a park. I'm not allowed to sleep on a sidewalk. I'm not allowed to sleep on a bench. I'm not allowed to sleep on St. Patrick's property. I'm not allowed to sleep on school board property. I'm not allowed to sleep.
Right.
In Walmart, on McDonald's, you're not allowed to sleep.
But you would think you would come to a homeless shelter and that they would figure it out.
Biddle Housing and Resources. Where's my resource?
So for right now, this is where you sleep.
Yeah, and my blankets and plastic. It became my best friend recently. Recyclable can. Keep me safe against bullets. Fence, and hopefully, more people, because if you sleep alone, things happen to
Right. Well, good luck to you tonight. Thank you. Okay.
Heads up.
All right. So I wanted to show you that you've had a chance to at least see Clyde here, who is basically trying to figure out the night and where she says this is where she is going to be, she says, for tonight. And this is basically by a series of dumpsters. And this is, I assume, where the Biddle House comes. I see it. Dumping their trash right here. So, but you can see, look at this. You can just see all the people. If you look this way, let's look down that way. Now, let's do better than this, guys. Let's go right down across the Biddle House. How about we do that? And so here, look at this scene right here. And keep in mind that it has to get 20 or below for the cold weather rule to kick in, for them to start admitting all the people inside, admitting people inside the building. So right now you just see a bunch of people, a lot of folks kind of walking away.
I believe there's like 2,500 people have nowhere to sleep in downtown St. Louis. That doesn't count all those in St. Louis County over in Illinois. So many people hurting, so many people homeless. And the Biddle House, it only provides for the men. The women are left out on the streets. They're hurting at this moment, and they need help. And that's what we're determined to do through the New Life Evangelistic Center. Contact us. Volunteer now. 314-421-3020.
Many people start lining up at 3 a.m. To try to get a spot in line here. And you can just see right in the Biddle House, you can see the folk in there. They're pretty, they're warm. Yesterday, I think it was the day before yesterday, it was like 32 degrees, and the people were still getting put out, obviously, because we were not in a cold weather rule. And that is where we are. And you just, again, just now, you heard from a woman who came to try to get a line on help, but was unable to because this is a men's shelter here at Biddle House. And women, like she said, were out of luck. When the cold weather rule is in place, they called some kind of transportation or the temporary places. The volunteers were out in force to give people rides to some of the churches that had opened their doors. They have since closed right now. I understand that some are going to reopen later in the week as it gets colder around Thursday, Friday. I understand St. Peter AME on Margaretta is going to reopen, we are told, but it can only hold 50. About 50, 60, somewhere in that neighborhood. They aren't equipped to, they're limited in what they can do and limited in how many people they can hold. When, of course, New Life was here, they had 200 beds. When the temperature dropped, they would admit more people. I spent a lot of time at New Life Center walking all around the place, and they had room for women as well as men. I mean, there was one where they had one room looked like it was the size of a gymnasium that had all the women. There was upstairs that had all the women, and they had space for them, and they would admit the women first, and then once they got all the women situated, then they would let the guys in. But here at Biddle House, this is for men, and so you just heard a woman who was turned away. And so just like you have men who are homeless, guess what? You have a lot of women who are homeless too. Unfortunately, a lot of them are out of luck tonight if they come to this shelter. Not only was she turned away, but no arrangement was made for her to get to a woman's shelter someplace that might help her. And so she is going to sleep behind the dumpster. Clyde, Washington. She's going to sleep behind the dumpsters over there. And again, as you heard her, she said she does that because it is safer, because police go up and down this area, and she just feels safer having to be out on the street and knowing that at least officers do go up and down this street. And so, like I said, she said she feels a little bit safer. And so she sleeps behind the dumpsters right here, again, across from Biddle House. A lot of people calling in. How is... let's say, I wonder when anyone will talk about self-accountability. This is Lamont. Well, you know, it's people end up out here because of a variety of reasons. It's easy to criticize when you're in a warm house and you got a job and everything is going great. But let events change. Let life take a turn of events. Let your company, for example, decide that they're going to go out of business, or they're going to lay you off, or let the paychecks stop for a few weeks. There was a study, and it said the average American has something like $1,000 saved or something like that. I think that was I saw that on one of the business channels, and they said that the average American had like $1,000 saved. So imagine what happens if you miss a few paychecks, and so add to that equation if you don't have family to go to, or there are some issues that family won't take you in or something like that. But just imagine there are a lot of scenarios where people can find themselves homeless without a place to be. And then certainly there are people with mental disabilities. There are a lot of people like that who are out on the street. A lot of mental health programs have been cut. And so there is less help for a lot of them. And so you will get people out here and they don't have a lot of families, and they have, like I said, mental disabilities. What are those people to do when you start talking about accountability? What about the people who have, like I said, mental disabilities? What are they to do? What about the people with physical disabilities? What are they to do if they cannot get a job, or they cannot have get a place to be? So a lot of people out here have both physical and mental disabilities that makes it kind of difficult. So are you going to say that those people are not accountable? Are you saying those people are not trying? And so you have to consider that. And I always say this, and here's one of my favorite phrases in life. I always say, there but for the grace of God go I. And simply that means that any one of us could end up in a bad situation. And if you look at these people, no one who is homeless, no one who is out here set out to be homeless and to be out on the street. No one asks for this life. It's not something that people desire. I don't want to, go off on a tangent here, but it's not something that people said, I want to be homeless. And I'm going to orient my life so I can do that. That's not really what happens. It's a series of events, some drugs that happens to some of them, but not everybody. I've talked to people that got put out of their homes lost their job. Well, that could happen to anybody. So anyway, there are a lot of reasons that people are out here and are homeless. And so I was just responding to the person that said, what about personal responsibility? So I wanted to chime in with that. You pay to run Biddle House. This is paid for with taxpayers' money. The churches were able to open up, but the churches operate on donations on a shoestring budget, and it was very difficult for them doing a lot of the things necessary to feed 50 people and the utilities and all the other expenses that come with it. So that was a very challenging thing for them. They didn't get help from the city, not financial help as far as I know, from the city, and so they had to do it on their own. And so when the weather got warmer, well, Biddle House suspends its cold weather rule when the temperature gets below a certain temperature. When it gets below 20 degrees, they turn people away, and they get paid with the taxpayers' funds. And they get paid to do this with government funding. So with the churches and everything, they are limited in what they can do. And here you can just get an idea of people as they try to figure out where they're going to be for the night, what's going to happen. Stacy is just saying, we're putting a light on the situation, and we are, because otherwise this place is out of the way. And so the homeless issue could become out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see them, you don't know what's going on. And so what we're trying to do is keep the spotlight on this issue so it doesn't get shuffled to the side and it doesn't get lost in the shuffle, and it doesn't become a forgotten issue. When they were on Locust in downtown directly in downtown St. Louis, across from the library, it was tougher for the city to hide the problem because they were all in plain view. I'm just giving you that view in Biddle House, and you can see the people are right in there, essentially right in the Biddle House Center. Doors closed, not admitting people right now, because the cold weather rule has been suspended, and so it's a rugged situation for a lot of people who are trying to get it figured out and trying to figure out where they are going to be. Let me read this. Margot is saying that Larry Rice was someone certainly who helped the homeless. Well, we just heard the young lady, Clyde, talk about that, how she used to go to Larry Rice. We not only Clyde, but we also heard from one of the organizations that helps the homeless, who you saw him come up as I was doing my interview with Clyde, who talked about how it's gotten harder for the homeless since the New Life Center shut down, how it has gotten much harder for homeless people to make it, because, as he said, there are, let's see, what did he say? There were like 500 beds available throughout the area, but there are like an estimated 2,800 2,800 homeless people downtown. And so that's a significant difference. And we took 200 or more beds offline when we shut down the New Life Center. We just heard the gentleman say, who's with the group that helps the homeless, that one young man who's 23 years old, this is the first time he's ended up out on the streets. And he's afraid, and he's trying to figure out just basically how he's going to make it. Nobody plans to be out here. Nobody starts their life as a kid saying, I want to be homeless. I want to be out on the street. I want to struggle. Nobody plans for this. Anyway, so you'll see people across the street. We saw Clyde, who's right down the street. Basically, they cannot get in. And I go back to, remember when the homeless and had pitched the kind of the tent encampment, and that was right on the street, right over from where I am now, and they had an encampment over there because some people had donated tents for them to be in so that they wouldn't have to sleep on the ground, and so they would have a way to block the wind. And so tents were donated to them to help them deal with the cold. The Cruzen administration determined that they could not stay on the sidewalk with their tents and forced them to move the tents, telling them that if the tents weren't moved, they'd be forcibly moved, that they would be, that they had to move. So they were evicted from, and it's not like it's a residential street, it's just behind a truck stop. But many of them, that was their home. And a lot of them said, hey, this is my house. And some of them felt a certain pride in that. But again, Cruzen administration officials forced them to leave the street where they really weren't hurting anybody. And they were just trying to survive. And like I said, they got the tents because of people who felt compassion for them and wanted to try to help them, but they were forced to move these tents out, and so you don't see anybody over there with the tents now because they were forced out. And so that happened under the Cruzen administration. Of course, New Life Center was shut down under the Slay administration. And again, I continue to make the point, it housed about 200 beds for 200 people. When it was cold, Reverend Rice often opened it up to more people because he hated to see people out in 8 and 10 degree weather. So he would make more room inside for more folk. And so you'd see just a lot of people in mats and everything on the floor, but at least they were inside from the cold. And that was just out of compassion. That was an organization that the city shut down. We're going to look at later in this week. It is going to be colder. And the cold weather rule will kick in, but you look in that for a few days, the people will come here, be able to get in, be able to send to a temporary shelter, and then they're back at square one. And so it is a struggle. It is a tough life, and people come to this homeless shelter to try to get a break. But again, they keep them during the day at 6 o'clock. If there are no beds and nobody's giving up beds, then they have to leave. They don't have one. And so they are out of luck, and it is a struggle, and they have to find a place to be. A lot of the places are full. No room at the inn. And so you have a lot of people basically who are struggling, again, in survival mode, kind of trying to figure out what to do for the night. And then, as we saw with women, this is a men's shelter. And so they don't accept the women in when the cold weather rule is not in place, and they don't we heard from Clyde, and they don't make arrangements to get the women to a shelter that could help them. So they are essentially out of luck, and there are women. A lot of homeless women, too. I've seen a lot of them. I've seen them in various places throughout the city, just trying to, on the sidewalk with a number of blankets, trying to find some place to be safe. And that is that story.
I thank God that Elliott's willing to go out and help monitor this situation, but the rest of you are needed. We must work together at this time. So many individuals remaining on the streets of St. Louis, as well as Springfield, Missouri, and other communities. New Life Evangelistic Center is working to be there when these individuals are hurting. Many opportunities await you. Go to newlifeevangelisticcenter.org and see these opportunities that are awaiting you. Let's pray. Let's work. Let's get 1411 Locust open back up again. We must do it. Yes, even when the city does provide a place for people to sleep, there's no God in all this because they don't share the Lord. That's what New Life does. And all the churches that have been really opening up their places like Salvation Army and Sunshine Mission, New Life Evangelistic Center in the past, they try to shut it down. We got to rise up at this time, take the gospel to the streets, and that's the opportunity we offer you at the New Life Evangelistic Center. Call us at 314-421-3020.